I learned this process of making features based on hypotheses, and the hypotheses are based on metrics. So it's like really narrowing in. It's like, if I add this specific feature, then this specific metric will move by this amount. And that's
Right.
like my guiding principle on if I'm like, before I was also just adding features because people said that they wanted it. But then it's like you kind of have to add a feature based on if they want it, and like with an intention of something, whether that's trying to make sure that they use it for longer, that their session time is longer, or that um they use it for another day in a row, or like all these, like there has to be at least like a metric to aim for when I'm still in these like early stages.
Welcome, everyone, to a new episode of the Zero to Play podcast. I'm your host, Jonathan Jennings, and today I'm joined by Bria Sullivan. Bria is a mobile game entrepreneur as well as the CTO and founder of HoneyB Games, which is currently behind multiple games, including Milk Tea Mania, Boba Barista Idle, and the popular public mobile game beta Boba Story, which has over 1.4 million users to date. Today, we'll be talking about transitioning from some of the world's largest tech organizations into an indie game startup, building a cozy game for large numbers of people, and discussing the gradual evolution of Bria as a game developer and some of the skills and knowledge she's picked up along the course of her journey. So sit back, relax, and enjoy this episode of Zero to Play podcast. So, hi, Bria. Yeah, thank you so much for joining us on the show. I appreciate you for joining us. I've been looking
Of
forward to this
course.
interview for a minute. Yeah, I'm super happy to have you here. Um, First question, always the hardest. Your games are really colorful, vibrant, chill, warm. They give me all sorts of good vibes, kind of looking at the visuals. They remind me a lot of like kind of storybooks. And I think that's just a really awesome kind of aesthetic you have.
Hmm.
So I'm kind of curious. What is your perfect, like if you had to imagine the perfect cozy space, what would that be? Like what would the food be? What would the music be? How would the room be
Yeah.
lit? Like, yeah, what
Yeah.
would that be?
So I actually experienced something many years ago. I was in Japan. It was in the morning, and I was in Daikanyama and went to this cafe. Um, called Blue Jam Cafe. There's one in there's I think two in California now, but I remember there was just like this French toast. And I think it was raining that day too, and it was overcast, and for some reason like that's the setting of Japan, or in Tokyo, the city, for some reason, even though it can feel very bustling, does feel very cozy to me. But so this isn't like a real thing, but when I think of my perfect cozy environment, I can imagine maybe like a cafe type setting that looks like a cottage, like an English, Welsh, or something cottage in the middle of Japan. I guess in the middle of Tokyo, where I can look, because you said perfect, so I using my imagination here, but
Right.
I think obviously like tip the typical tea, coffee, some type of warm drink, and obviously cinnamon rolls,
Oh, of
because
course.
cinnamon rolls is a thing that you can't really get, like a good one. You can't really get a lot of places. So yeah, and I actually started making a game like about this specifically, but it started costing a lot of money to develop it, or just in terms of like, because the artwork and the art style, I just imagined this, and I just like, I can imagine that's what I want. I imagine like a tea house that looks very um in nature, but I don't want to be all the way in nature. I want to be like have some flowers, but then I look outside and it's a city. So that's what's cozy to me.
I love it. Oh, that's good. Solid answer. Solid answer.
Thanks.
Uh, um, I guess with that said, right? When I guess starting with the game, I guess what did the idea of like having because you have multiple games, right? But definitely Boba seems to be central to many of your games themes. So did
Mhm.
you like want a game centered around Boba like from the start? Was like that interesting to you or
Yeah, that's kind of the entire reason why I started making games. I I've been drinking bubble tea, boba, milk tea, tapioca, pearls, whatever that you want to call it,
Mhm.
since I want to say high school, and then really dove into it in college. So this is like 2010 to 2014. And that's when I already loved playing food games, and there wasn't a lot of games about bubble tea or boba. And I remember one of my friends was like, that I used to get boba with. We were some of the only like people of color in our class, and so the thing that we used to do together, we would study and then go to and get boba. And he was the one who like planted that in my mind, but he didn't play games like that, those kind of games like that. But I'm the food game obsessed person. So this has kind of been in my mind since about like 2013. And when I made the jump in 2020, I was still kind of deciding what I was going to do with my career. I definitely knew I needed to make a change. But I remember just looking at the App Store again because I'm a mobile game player.
Mhm.
I looked at the App Store and there was finally, I would check sporadically since like 2013. I would always check the App Stores. Is there a game about bubble tea yet? Is there a game about bubble tea yet? Then there finally was one. It was a hyper casual game and it was going crazy in
Wow.
the App Store. So that inspired me. But then, so the reason I've stuck with boba, bubble tea, whatever, has been that like the act of getting boba is something you kind of always associate joy with. You don't, it's not a treat that people necessarily go by themselves. Like I go by myself all the time, but it's usually like getting bubble tea or going to boba or, doing boba. That's an activity that usually people do together. It's something that brings people together and it's usually something people associate happiness and joy with. And it's
Mhm.
just gotten more and more popular since when I was younger. So it just seemed like a good fit for making a game.
That's awesome. Wow. So you were like you really kind of stuck to like what you love. You kind of made what you
Mhm.
know. Yeah, that's awesome. Wow. And oh yeah. Oh, go ahead. Go ahead. We're going to say
Oh, I
something.
was yeah, so I was just gonna say, like, even now with my cousins and family, when people come visit me, because I live in an area where there's tons of options that people even before I made the games, people would always, like, want to do that. Then when they come visit you, they go do that, and, like, if you go to a shop, you'll probably see m people in multiples or at least in 2 or they're ordering 2.
Mm,
Um,
okay.
eventually, like, it's just something that people like to do together. So hopefully I can eventually make games of people doing it together. But the joy part of it, where it's like, this is a food that people don't get for nourishment, you know? So that's why I'm like, okay, people already love food games. I love food games. How do I? And I'm still trying to figure it out. I don't. I'm getting there in terms of like finding the right fit. But like even my games journey has just been, do people want to play a game about bubble tea? Like, do they? So that's still the answer that
Mhm.
I'm trying to answer. So because it's still relatively like it's a thing that is like it's popular
Right.
for sure in a lot of countries, but it's not a staple the way that maybe like a cupcake is, you know?
Oh, I love this. So it's almost like there's like a cultural ranking of food, like or like what
Yeah.
really what food
Yeah.
brings people together the most.
Yeah, I guess, or I guess when it's like people often to birthday parties, they bring cupcakes, you know?
Right, right.
Or if there's even like a work launch party or something, people get cupcakes or cakes or maybe or pizza or something. But I'm starting to see boba as more and more. I mean, like this is all I study now is like how
Mhm.
people are using it, and so I've seen more people try to get them at weddings, try to get them catered. Like people are trying to figure that out now. So
That
it's getting there. So hopefully. hopefully the game will go along with the craze.
Right, absolutely.
Yeah.
I love it. You're at the beginning of the boba or milk tea revolution, right?
Hmm.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Um, Yeah, so and you kind of alluded to kind of your background and like kind of
Hmm.
I guess even just on your journey as a developer, kind of like milk tea and boba being important to you. So I guess I'd love to hear more about that. Like, right, what how did you start your tech career? What kind of inspired you to get into it? All that.
Hmm.
Yeah. Mhm.
So I guess with game, uh, uh, I guess I'm trying to figure out if I should start from the beginning or work my way back.
For
I guess I'll
sure.
work my way back because that'll probably be a little bit more interesting.
Okay.
I decided that I wanted to make games in 2020. I had not done any kind of game development, and I didn't even think that I could. It seemed like just completely out of my comfort zone, and like I didn't even know where to start. I didn't know what tools to use, and I also just didn't think that I was enough of a type of person that could do it. Um, but in 2020, I just kind of like got the inspiration and I got an almost like permission from someone else in games. It's just like, yeah, just do it. This is what just try this thing. Um,
Mhm.
and until that's when I finally decided to like, okay, 2020, I'm going to quit my job completely and not even have a plan. I'm just going to try some stuff. So that was 2020. Prior to that, I was at Google for almost 5 years as a software engineer. It was good for me. I did a lot of like cool stuff. But with big tech organizations, it's like in terms of growth, it starts to just get a little bit hard, especially when like you're working on big bureaucratic things. There's just a lot of checks and balances. And like as a person that loves to build things, when you go a long time without having shipped something because things are taking so long, it just gets a little exhausting. It's like I want to just get something in front of a person, you know. Prior to that, I guess I was at Microsoft, and I also used to do like mobile game develop or sorry, not just mobile development on the side. iOS and native Android. So I was like a native
Wow.
purist. I was a native purist. I
Wow.
was like, I am not doing a single line of any type of Ionic or
Wow.
phone gap, it was called for a while. My React Native, I was like, no, 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 no. We don't do that here. We don't do that in this house. I feel lucky that I joined computer science in college at a very interesting time for computers or for tech. 2010. I chose my major computer science at random. I did not know what coding was. I did not know what engineering was. And it was very interesting to watch, just even as a young girl. Like not none of my peers knew what those things were either. And I just chose them because I like science and math. But I also now don't believe you have to be good at science and math to be good at computer science.
Mhm.
But that's what led me to technology, and also just like wanting to understand how things are built. But I think being my first class just kind of introducing me, I didn't even know that the major that I chose was going to be the thing that like makes apps. I was like, I didn't even
Right.
have a smartphone when I got to school. I still had a flip phone when I got to college, and I had to
Right.
beg my parents. I was like, Mom and Dad, I really, I think I want to try mobile development. I want to teach myself while I'm at school. Can I please get an Android? So that's how my that it started with Android, and I got to at least understand the stores and all that kind of stuff. But still, then and up until 2020, I had no idea that I could ever make a game.
Wow.
Yeah.
That is so unconventional, right? And
Mhm.
impressive that you've had so much success in tech and games um and it feels like it's something that's been born out of passion and just kind of and to a degree some randomness. And
Completely random, yeah.
and that makes me wonder, right? Like, you've worked at Microsoft, you've worked at Google, right? You've worked at some of the top tech firms in the world. And so I'd love to know, like, kind of what led you to want to transition into an indie game startup mindset,
Yeah.
and did you take anything from that, those bigger organizations into kind of your startup environment?
Mhm. Um, I, um I guess I am still figuring out the size of indie game company or gaming company that I want to
Mhm.
build, but, I think, well, I'm gonna write down what was the question again? Sorry.
Right, no worries. So, like, is there anything you've kind of taken from your experience at Microsoft and Google into kind of like working on your own indie game startup, right? Like, is it?
Yeah. Oh,
Mhm.
and you asked what kind of what was the motivation into doing this? Because my answer is very
Definitely.
short for that. It's just
Oh,
it
sure.
seems kind of fun, and so and I didn't know better, and I didn't know better. The idea, I'm grateful that I've done it this way, and I did want to just say that um I'm not doing things technically traditional, and I
Mhm,
may have done it differently if I knew a little bit more, but I'm also grateful that I didn't,
mhm,
because there are a lot of I think there's the path that I've seen a lot of people do, that has actually worked for a lot of people, um, is when they want to transition out of tech and into gaming, they will work at a gaming um,
mhm,
startup or working at a gaming at an indie game studio, or even go work at Unity or something first.
mhm. Right.
Um, but I was done. I was like, I'm done working for someone right now. I'm done working for someone, and I'm done having like a schedule right now. I saved a good amount of money, and then I also I moved back in with my family, which I'm very very lucky or very blessed to be able to do, um, because it's not the life that I was living before.
Mhm, mhm,
Um, but yeah, it seemed like the right thing to do, where it's just like it seems fun. Um it seems like it's really hard too. So that's why I liked it.
mhm,
But what have I taken from Google or Microsoft? Or I guess the skills, I would say, is some of the planning, like writing design
mhm.
docs. I write design docs for myself.
Oh,
And
okay.
even when I hire a contractor for as an artist or something, um, I will write a very detailed document where it's like the beginning, the first sentence of the document is the purpose of this document is to outline blank. You know what I mean?
Right.
So very those kind of processes did help me, at least with planning and maybe understanding the value in like CI/CD pipelines,
Mhm,
um, where like just having automation and stuff like that. I
mm,
would say those are the things that I've learned. And I guess I've also learned what not to do as well, with how long to spend on something.
mhm.
Um, yeah. And then also and this is kind of part of the one of the other questions that you had that I wasn't really answering about
So
tech.
nice.
It's
Mhm,
just a lot of the asking the question, how will this affect the lives of people? Like,
mm,
what are the ethics behind this? Um, I make sure to ask myself those questions too. So
mhm,
right now, for now, I've made free to play games.
mhm,
And there's a lot of ethical battles when it comes to that.
mhm,
How much advertising and I don't have any in-app purchases yet, because I'm still like fine tuning the game design, and I
mhm.
think people get upset when they pay for things. They start to get upset, and so I'm like, I'm gonna wait to put
Right,
in-app purchases in until later, until I make sure that people can feel value.
right.
Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah. So I think those are the things that I've taken. Well, maybe even with running my team,
Mhm,
um, like being a team lead. on certain projects at Google has helped me see what to do and what not to do, and make sure that everyone feels heard, and make sure that there's a safe space for people to give feedback. I think that's something that every manager or lead has to work on, is if because I think it's easy to fall into this where
Mhm.
you're just kind of worried about the deadline, and sometimes you will maybe like shit on someone's design, or
Yeah.
or like just be like, oh no, we shouldn't do that. But making sure, doing check-ins, making sure that people are happy with how things are going, like those are the things
Mhm.
that I took it from Google.
Mm.
Yeah.
Wow, that's awesome. Wow. And so, like, of course, I did like research on you, like, before our podcast, right? And I've been following your work for a
Thanks.
while now.
Thank you.
And hearing about you talk about ethics in tech, which that we don't often get to have that conversation, but I really there's like a brand. You do a lot of really impressive technical complicated stuff,
Thank
but
you.
there's a layer of like humanity and kind of connecting to people and really kind of bringing people together. And I really admire that you can, it seems like you can balance both of those aspects, because they can be very different, different ends of the spectrum. And I really
Mhm.
admire that. It seems like you really take to heart both the hard, complex technical stuff as well as like the human element. Like that's awesome.
Thank you. I had a business actually. I mean, it's still technically it exists. It's on pause
Mhm,
for
mhm,
now.
mhm,
About just helping people get into tech or into technical roles, but also trying to get people to help other underrepresented founders with their startups. So I got to see a lot. I heard a lot of crying or
mhm,
frustration, or just a lot of things that people were dealing with, and I just wanted to make sure that with whatever I do moving forward, I want to make sure that to not do that, or to make sure that like to understand the human behind that. And then even with like I build in public, with meaning that I post everything that I do. I'm not really like secretive, and I didn't realize until getting
mhm.
more into gaming that sometimes people can be
Mhm,
very secretive with their numbers or with like
mhm.
how they accomplish things. Um I don't know yet if that's going to bite me in the ass one day, but it might. It might. I'm not saying it's good or bad. I'm just saying that's but doing that has helped people at least cuz I am a beginner when it comes to gaming.
Mhm,
I am a
mhm,
beginner.
mhm.
I'm not a beginner coder or engineer, but
Right.
when it comes to gaming, I'm still very new. So, in doing building publicly, it has at least attracted some people who are veterans who can help me. I was not really the one to ask for help before, or even like get help. It was always just like I have to figure it out. But
Mhm,
I'm the oldest sister, so
mhm,
I've had always had
mhm.
to figure it out. But yeah, it
Mhm,
seems like for the most part, my experience with people in gaming, or at least the ones who've come to talk to me, have been very,
mhm.
very kind and helpful.
That's awesome. I love to hear
Mhm.
that. That's
Yeah.
fantastic. Very cool. And so I'd love, you talk about being a beginner, right? And kind of
Mhm.
like you're still learning. I'd love to hear like what was it? Could you walk me through like building your first game and maybe some of the stuff you learned? Mhm.
Ooh, this is so fun. Okay, I never really get to talk to about the first game, Milk Tea
Mhm.
Mania. So,
Mhm.
I am always inspired by like, and this is not new. I'm sure every single game developer feels this way. Like you're inspired by the games that you liked when you were a kid, you know,
Mhm.
like or what you
Mhm.
liked when you were younger, or that you currently like now.
Mhm.
There is this game by Lilo, like the Lilo and Stitch people. It was like a sandwich soccer game.
Mhm.
That
Mhm.
seemed like the easiest thing that I could do at the time. And so I found like a tutorial. It might have been by people at Unity, called like Hat Catcher or something. And it was just a
Mhm.
hat catching bowling
Oh.
balls.
Mhm.
Yeah, it's just some YouTube thing. I just wanted to see if I could do. boba with that. So it's like catch an ingredient and it makes a drink, follow a specific order that's at the
Mhm.
top, catch that order, or
Mhm.
catch the ingredients that would complete that order.
Mhm.
Um, it was my first time using Unity, and
Mhm.
it was like the game is fine, but it was just a lesson in like things looking
Mhm.
dead, or even using brown sometimes will look like poop instead
Oh
instead
no.
of yeah. Because I had like a boba ball and it was just like a
Mhm.
ball dropping, and learning how colliders worked,
Right.
learning about, I think I added collider because I was like, I think one of the prefabs, because I was trying to do a trail on the
Mhm.
ball falling,
Oh, okay.
um, or the boba ball was falling from the top of the screen, and
Mhm.
I watched, the famous juice video, like
Mhm.
the juicing or the juicy make a juicy game video,
Right.
and
Mhm.
about adding all these different things. So the ball was falling from the top and it was still like a brown ball, and then
Mhm.
when I add a trail to it, it looks like a full turd. So because it's like a ball, and then I was like, okay, well, I'll make the trail be like
Mhm.
smaller as it's falling.
Mhm.
So it'll look like a turd falling.
Oh
So it
man.
was because it was brown. And then I think instead of instantiating just like images, I was instantiating a prefab with colliders on it. So
Mhm.
the trail all of a sudden was making the whole game like go crazy, because the trail
Mm.
ended up being able to collide with everything else. So that was
Oh
kind of fun.
man.
Um, I know this is like beginner mistakes, obviously, but it was fun. It was super fun, and
Mhm.
I remember sitting on that game for a bit, and just trying to work on levels, trying to import levels through JSON, um, and then again with like building in public or building other things in public, I ended up having someone or just talking to someone about something else than mentioning games, and he was the first person to say like, "W- your thing should not be more levels. How do you know, like, you already have
Mhm.
a beta, how do you know if
Mhm.
people are getting past level 1, 2, 3, whatever?" Because I think I had 25 levels at that time,
Oh
um
wow.
on the game. And he
Mhm.
was like, you should release it now, because if you're like, the on your immediate roadmap is to make sure you have 100 levels, release it right now, and see if people are getting like add analytics to it really quick, and see if people are getting what levels people are finishing. If they're finishing all 25, that's great. So
Mhm.
that was one of my first lessons, was about like not trying to optimize for end game in the beginning,
Mhm.
and that has super helped me, for every game that I've made since. But are these beginner concepts? Are these things that they teach you in game design schools? I don't
uh,
actually know.
some parts like colliders, right? You like those are instrumental, right? So that type of stuff, making sure that your trail renderers don't collide against everything, like that's like an experience thing, right?
Hmm.
Knowing when to like launch your game to kind of get a sense of like play testing and all that, like that's most professors don't have that much game industry experience, so it's not often
Hmm.
that you get to hear that stuff.
Okay.
So yeah, it sounds like there's some stuff, like some of it was like beginner problems, but also some of it's like advanced stuff you learned really early in your career, which is impressive. Yeah.
Well, like at the heart, I feel like a product manager.
For
But
sure.
and so that has been what's helpful. I feel like my whole career and I have been in that role before. But
Hmm.
it is a hard role. I would not want that
Hmm.
job in a professional setting. Like like every time I've worked with a product manager in tech, it's like, your job seems hard, or not just seems, like, you
Right.
work really hard. I You are always working. I do not
Hmm.
envy that. But I'm trying to think of anything else I learned from that. I mean, just like getting something in people's hands, getting a bunch of feedback, who are not your friends. I feel like, um, obvious things. I knew it was a new game, but like people were like, it needs music, it needs this is hard. Even with how where the order where I gave the bubble drink or the boba tea drink order, it was
Mhm.
at the top of the phone, and so when people would get notifications, it would cover it. But luckily,
Uh,
having like an online platform, or at least like just constantly posting and asking for people's feedback, um, people were fine giving it. This is a lesson that I learned recently, just in terms of getting playtester feedback if remotely, if you can't get it like directly. This seems obvious, but it wasn't obvious to me. Some of the best playtester things that I've gotten is when someone just like sends a screen recording of when they
yeah.
very, very first join the game, and then I see like them, why are you clicking that? Like obviously if I'm next to someone and I can observe that, but that's much harder in this remote world right now. Yeah,
Right.
so the screen recording is good too.
Right. I totally get that. And I think that's, and even in my career, probably the best play tests have always, because it's players are funny, right? Like sometimes they'll tell
Mhm.
you that they're having a problem, and even the problem they describe isn't actually what's happening. And so when you run it back and you watch what's happening, it's like, oh, you saw that, you thought that meant something else. And like maybe I have to
Yeah.
change the color, maybe I have to change its shape, right? Maybe I have to make it easier, all that. Yeah. I mean, I guess I'd love to know about kind of ramping up to your current game. Was it surprising that you have over 1 million players? Like, what is it like going from that starting phase to where you are now?
Um, it's interesting. Okay. So
Okay.
a I did the first game, like Milk Tea Mania, and obviously just like kind of learned um a couple things about Unity, and then I did, and I don't talk about this a lot, but I did 5 text-based RPGs with a partner that we no longer work
Mhm,
together. But we had already planned on doing like a boba themed idle game. But
mhm,
this partner was kind of like a very like a mobile purist and wanted to write the engine, and so we wrote the
oh, wow.
engines for the text-based RPGs, and then I just took the knowledge from that I got from like doing that, and I wrote the engine for an idle game. Um,
Mhm.
and oh my god, it was really hard. It was really
I
hard because
bet.
like even scaling, oh my god, like scaling was so difficult. And I wrote that in Flutter. I don't regret doing that. I think that it was necessary for me to even understand how Unity worked, because
Mhm,
like writing in Flutter, it redraws the screen, or the screen every
mm,
frame, and it calls a specific method every frame, which is
mhm,
basically what update does.
right.
So in Unity,
Mhm,
but
mhm,
that is at least where I got to understand a little bit with the idle game, um, like a clicker game, what have you, for mobile. I think I got a better understanding of mobile economies, um, with like balancing and stuff, because like I've said a lot, like I am a beginner and I don't know a lot of these things, like these words like balance, game balancing. I've heard
sure.
game design is one thing, but I didn't
Mhm,
understand what like balancing looked like, and even how to
right.
do that on on like a spreadsheet. Even with the idle game at first, that was just, I just played around with numbers and I was like, I'll just multiply by whatever, and then obviously like people are
Mhm,
earning like insane amounts of money really
mhm,
quick because there's no formula that I was going that I was following. But at least with that game, that was the game that I was able to start my TikTok with and trying to get users for that.
mhm,
And with the TikTok, it's really, really helped with like unpaid user acquisition if I'm not counting my time with using
right.
TikTok. Um,
Mhm,
so I was at least able to see, like, narrow in on who my user is.
Mhm.
So, and this is my, like, product experience talking, but I think what I was doing before was I thought that I needed to target people that liked bubble tea
Mhm.
and bring them to playing the game.
Mhm.
Um, but and that's where I made a mistake with my targeting or with my approach to the game. I was really just trying to optimize for like boba fanatics, and
Right.
but I did have to learn a lot about like people that like boba and the things that they like.
Mhm.
Um, but I was making a lot of assumptions with that game and moving into Boba's story. I think I had to change my approach. I changed it to instead, I need to optimize for people that play mobile games that like boba.
Right.
Um, yeah,
Okay.
um, instead of trying to be people's first mobile game,
Right.
I need to understand how mobile game players' behaviors are. Um, so I started like paying attention to that more and seeing what mechanics that mobile game players liked rather than trying to do the other way.
Mhm.
And that's how I started with Boba Story. And then there was no real storyline
Mhm.
behind Boba Barista Idle, but
Mhm.
with Boba Story, there's so many free resources online. So I did
Mhm.
the free Pixar storytelling class.
That's awesome.
Um, yeah, and so that's how I was able to come up with the backstory of Boba's story, and then I was able to like just narrow in on some good mobile mechanics and then take pieces of mobile mechanics of games that people like right now, and then I mix that with mechanics of games that I used to like playing when I was younger. So I mix those two things and then came up with Boba Story, and then luckily I started to have like a good enough following from TikTok that like getting people excited about the pre-launch, or not pre-launch, the what is that called, pre-registration and pre-ordering, like getting pre-orders
Mhm.
up,
Right.
getting that page up as soon as possible is was like very instrumental to the initial success, or at least like it's mobile
Mhm.
gaming, so
Mhm.
like you can release updates, and also like data is your best friend. So
Right.
like making sure that I really understood what metrics that I needed to pay attention to in order to figure out like what step to take next, and all of that. But in I know I'm just rambling, but I'm just trying to give like my process. But basically,
No worries. No worries.
basically, like with Boba Story, I had the idea that like I'm gonna launch it, or I'm gonna build this, only take as little time as possible, and I could have probably left a lot out and launched even sooner, but I took about 4 months of development time on it. Um, 6 months in terms of like actual time, but I took a two
Mhm.
and a half month break just to hang out with my family. Um,
Mhm.
and anyway, so um, after I launched that, I didn't want to spend I wanted to do that and then move on to the next game, keep working on the next game, keep just trying to launch games, see what works, see what mechanics people are liking. But it turned out with Boba Story that like there was enough there for me to maybe just invest a little bit more, but
Mhm.
I learned this process of making features based on hypotheses, and the hypotheses are based on metrics. So it's like really narrowing in. It's like if I add this specific feature, then this specific metric will move by this amount, and that's
Right.
like my guiding principle. On if I'm like before I was also just adding features because people said that they wanted it, but then it's like you kind of have to add a feature based on if they want it, and like with an intention of something, whether that's trying to make sure that they use it for longer, that their session time is longer, or
Mhm.
that um they use it for another day in a row, or like all these, like there has to be at least like a metric to aim for when I'm still in these like early stages. So
Right.
that's yeah. So I guess what I was doing is I would have a hypothesis, feature, launch it, wait 2 weeks, at least 2 weeks, to get data on
Mhm.
Boba Story. And then
Mhm.
in those 2 weeks, work on a new game, start designing a new game, and hopefully to get my prototyping down from 4 months to, I would love to get it down to like 1.5 months. That would be awesome. Um, that would be super awesome. But right now, and be, so Boba Story's success is kind of random, and so I don't want to claim a lot. Um, I'm very, very grateful, and I'm like, oh my gosh, like this is super cool. But I'm trying to also not get clouded by
Mhm.
it, where the 1.6 million that we're at now
Wow.
was real, like I didn't do anything. Like I didn't do anything differently from November to December to January. I think it just started, I think it got featured, or at least like in
Uh,
one country.
mhm.
But what that does tell me is that, like, hopefully when I start doing paid acquisitions, that hopefully UA costs aren't that high. Hopefully if I
Right.
do get those placements, or if I do put a little bit more effort into getting higher placements, like conversions will be good.
Right.
Um, but like I think I was only, or not only, I was like I was ecstatic to
Mhm.
reach 150,000 for
I
Boba Story
bet.
in like December, or even just 100,000 in December. I was like, I feel like on top of the world, you know? Like I feel like I'm getting somewhere. I feel like I'm getting somewhere.
Right.
Um
Right.
but um yeah, so I'm learning about that, but it started happening in February,
Mhm.
and I just started seeing numbers that had I was just like, "Whoa, 35,000 people downloaded this today? Like, that's
Mhm.
crazy.
Right.
100,000 people played this today? Like, that's crazy." Um, I mean, like,
Mhm.
again, very grateful.
Right.
It's taken a dip in, like, the past 2 days, but I
Mhm.
think maybe it's just not getting featured, so I'm just trying to, like, stay heads down and just try to focus. I
For
was working
sure.
on my other game,
Mhm.
but now I'm working on, I'm I'm focusing a little bit more on Boba Story because it is unfinished. It's a
Mhm.
beta, and there's no ad mediation. There's not there's not a lot of there's like there is a storyline
Mhm.
in my head. It's not actually in the game yet. So
Mhm.
but what was cool is, I guess, because a lot of the people were downloading from TikTok. Um Sometimes that might not be a reliable metric when it comes to retention, like, if people are going to
Right.
use it on the next day or the next day after, because sometimes it doesn't speak to the game, it speaks to how my TikTok is doing. But
Right.
what was nice with what I learned from this huge Android spike is that the numbers are good with it not being tied to my TikTok, or not tied to like me as a person. Like these are just, random people playing.
Right.
So now I need to actually focus on, that day 3 to day 7, make
Right.
sure that people are liking it. Then I can figure out the other free to play stuff.
Right.
Like actual,
Wow.
I mean, I have 3 unmediated reward ads in there, but other
Mhm.
than those 3, I don't have a lot of monetization. But I asked, it is going to pay for enough of artwork for the rest of the year. So
That's awesome. Okay.
yeah.
That's great. I mean, when your game starts paying for itself, you're doing something right, right?
Yeah,
Mhm.
so I'm not in the hole, but I'm
Right.
not
Mhm.
I would say I'm profitable, but like because I'm not paying myself.
For sure. For sure. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Wow. And so like hearing that and just, during the course of this interview, right? You're kind of fearless when it comes to learning new stuff. Like you are ready. Like
Mhm.
if it takes me to grasp a whole new domain, I will dive in 100%. I admire that. Wow.
Thank you.
Yeah. Have you always been like that or
Yes, kind of. I think because I've been making apps for a long time, I've
Mhm,
gotten
mhm.
over that. I mean, there's this element of perfectionism that I think most people have where it's like,
Right.
I can't launch this. I have to, it needs to have this. It needs to have that. It needs to have, like, it needs to be the idea that I see it in my head in order for it before it gets into people's hands. And so I think what ends up happening is that there ends up being GitHub repositories full of
Mhm.
75% finished projects
Right.
that, and I was guilty of this. And I saw like a Reddit post or something a long time ago where it was like, you romanticize this idea that you have in your mind of what this will be. And what ends up happening is that you never end up making it
Mhm.
because um, it's better when it's just an idea. But I think because I've dealt with that before, and I've also dealt with failure before with my first ever app that I made failed. I've not been afraid of what people would call failure,
Right.
um, because I don't believe in failure. I believe that everything is just a lesson, and it's like, if I just think that maybe it's just a redirection. I guess I don't believe in failure. I believe in lessons. So not being afraid to fail is has helped me. Um, and also, like, I had, and this is something I had to learn, this isn't something I was born with, um not having emotional attachments to the outcome of
Wow.
like what these things are. Sorry.
Oh, wow. No, no, no worries, no worries. Wow, that's awesome. I mean, I think the whole game industry could use a lesson in that. I know I have attachments to the games I work on, so I get it. It's a hard
Mhm.
thing to unlearn.
Yeah. Oh, I mean, like, I'm still a little emotionally attached to it just because I put so many hours in it. But at the same time,
Right.
this is something that I can have stoicism about because I have worked with people and like working with people's careers,
Mhm.
or with people's startups. I think everyone, like, working with people is so difficult because I might not have an emotional attachment to like their startup, but they might, but I at least have an emotional attachment to them,
Right.
and they, and the way that they will take, their career, or getting a job rejection, getting some type of ab- emotional or abuse or whatever from like a manager. Those are the things that I cannot have stoicism about. Like, I've cried with so many people over these things, so like I've had to, but this is the one thing I'm like, okay, if it doesn't work, it doesn't really have anything to do with me. It just means that I need to get better at XYZ. Um, yeah, and you can't lie about data when with certain things, So
Right.
if my game is telling me, like, this isn't the number, but like if my game is telling me that people only want to play this for 12 minutes, there's nothing I can do to argue with that. That's how long they want to play it, you know.
That's awesome. Oh, wow. Um, it's tough because I could talk to you all day. So, but I guess I have to let you go back to the real world. But um, so I mean, I guess so. I guess my final question is right.
Final.
You or well, or getting close to
Okay.
final.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay, that's all right.
Cool.
Um, so you do a lot of work with like the hard data, right? Like you're
Mhm.
really good about like kind of like you said, you really let the data speak to you and your experience and what you can kind of inform about like what delivering features. And but you also spoke a little bit earlier about kind of what I think is one of the more kind of delicate nuances of game design we don't talk about, which is the psychology of players, right?
Mhm.
Like and how to make players do what you want, how to communicate with players, right? All that stuff. And so I guess in a larger question, right? How your games are so cozy, they're so welcoming, they're so warm and cozy, like right? Uh, how do you take the hard data and then make it welcoming and cozy and something people want to engage in?
I don't know I don't know the answer to that. I don't know. I mean, I think that a lot of these things, and I'm not presenting
Mhm.
any new information, but I think a lot of these things have been
Sure.
solved by people who have teams bigger than me that are because right now I have two contracted artists and that's it. But
Okay.
yeah, it's like I think people have solved a lot of these issues and then being able to just apply the things that other people have solved to the games because I think I almost have to work backwards. It's like, how do I get someone? Because like again, like, this is something that I learned from like a business book, where you look at or you choose like, okay, the metric being people are like playing my game 2 days in a row, great, but they are not that likely or not as likely to play it 3 days in a row.
Mhm.
Why is that? Where are they dropping off at? Look at the data of like, okay, maybe it's not being fun at this point, or they don't have something to work towards. What feature can I do that I think that they will want, that they could get to, or would get them to want to play for 3 days in a row? So yeah, I guess I have to go backwards, and then maybe not 100%, but it's like, can I at least get it up 5 percentage points
Mhm.
or whatever,
Mhm.
or if it's like people are playing for 1 hour and 2 minutes, what can I do to get the average to be in a 30-day period for it to
Mhm.
be 1 hour and 10 minutes? Yeah.
Wow, that's awesome. Wow. I love it. Like your game design's really informed by the data and like kind of really kind of teasing the numbers and figuring out how to get the maximum output. I think that's awesome. And we don't hear a lot about that in game design, unfortunately, but I think that there's a real value to that.
Oh, is
Absolutely.
it not? I like I'm not, I'm more just like, how do people usually do it?
Well, it's hard because so there are definitely people who it's hard because the truth is every game studio is different, right?
Hmm.
Everybody builds games differently. Everybody has different intentions, right?
Hmm.
Kind of in every even driving mantras, right? And so I definitely think in the mobile space, there's a lot more kind of focus on data, but even I think the way you kind of use data without profit incentive being the number one focus, right? Because I used to work on mobile games, and like it was always how do we get people to spend more money? And I
Hmm.
guess if they play longer, that's cool, right? But you really seem focused on like the data informing the experience, and I think that's different. Um,
Okay, cool. I mean, I
mhm,
think I learn from more of the Steam play and or those indie developers, or at least like what I look at, because there's not a lot of mobile people on YouTube. Um, so or I think, but yeah, so I that's where I learned from, and then even the communities that I've built or the friends or online friends that I've built have are not always in the mobile space. But yeah, like monetization is a thing for later because I want to make sure um in a good, I guess this is a good and a bad thing, or this can be debated, but because a lot of my user acquisition is from TikTok, it's tied to me as a person. So I need to also make sure that people are happy. But that's all, it's also very nice because people will give you a bunch of ideas too.
I bet. Yeah, absolutely. I that's awesome. Wow. And do you and I guess I did notice you have quite a following, right? I've seen like a few streamers who like, they'll stream your game for like a series of like, I saw one streamer had like 7 videos on yours and there were like people trading tips on like the best boba recipes and all sorts of stuff. And like, you mentioned like you valuing the community, and does it feed you to have so many people who love your game kind of also participating in the conversation of making your game?
That has been kind of the most surprising part, with the
Okay.
rise, I guess. And I released a feature. It was kind of my intention, but I didn't know that people actually were going to do it.
Right.
I was inspired by there are some games kind of like Suki Adventure
Mhm,
where you have to look up guides to figure out what to do in this game.
mhm,
So I ended up adding a feature where it's like you can guess all you want what the recipes for these things are,
mhm,
but like what my goal was to facilitate people having online conversations about it, and it was completely unexpected that people even ended up creating YouTube videos. And I'm like, I think people would think that a developer would be mad that someone put every single answer, but I was
mhm.
like, whoa, you to play my game? Like, you play my game and you wanna do this? Like, that's very, very cool. Um, so
Mhm.
I am very, very happy with that.
That's awesome. That's
Yeah, so
awesome.
I hope that people, it's still not in a stage where I think people can, or that I thought people would wanna stream it, and I've found that there's kind of like a difference a little bit in the, community that I make games for,
Mhm,
or even just me as a gamer. Like, I've played maybe 1 Steam game, and it
mhm.
was unpacking because everyone was talking about it, but,
Mhm,
I'm not a
mhm,
Steam game player.
mhm,
I'm more of a mobile game player, so I feel like I've had to stay in my lane, and I think in the, like, cozy space, like, a lot of, there's, like, gamers in there's almost, like, levels of how deep they are into it, so, that's been kind of just interesting to watch is, uh I like a lot of these games, but, like, play I don't have a gaming PC. I have a MacBook, and, not a lot of games are compatible with
mhm,
it, so, it's just been kinda interesting, to watch, and even just, like, trying to study the user that I'm going after, even though it is technically a cozy game, I think there's a little bit of variation. Like, I think I want to make games for people that, like, maybe like myself didn't know to consider myself a gamer until you realize you play games every day. It's just not on a
mhm.
platform yet that
Right.
people would call. Yeah.
That's fantastic. Absolutely. Absolutely. And I also have the MacBook for most of my work. So I get, that not
Hmm.
getting much love on the Steam store with your device for sure. Well, for sure. Well, thank you so much, Bria. I think we're getting close to wrapping up. All right, but so I'd
Hmm.
love, I follow you on all sorts of platforms in your work. But for those who are more curious and want to learn more about your upcoming games, your upcoming work, and kind of just hear more from you, where can they follow you?
So if you want to follow me, or follow Boba Story or the
Mhm,
artwork, you can follow my TikTok. It is at Boba Bria, so
mhm,
Boba and then Bria.
mhm,
And my Twitter, I will post kind of just random stuff about what I've learned, or what's going on. And my Twitter is like Bria_Sullivan. I do a lot of tweeting about like I not what's the best word for this? I guess I tweet a lot about things like just do it, or
uh-huh,
motivational, not
mhm,
necessarily motivational, but kind of where it's more just like I want to make sure that everyone knows that I don't know what I'm doing, and that like
mhm,
I didn't know what I was doing in doing this, and hopefully um someone like no one else will feel like they have to be an expert to try something. So I tweet a lot about stuff like that.
That's awesome.
If
I
you
mean,
want to
I think
follow
we
me on
need.
Twitter.
Yeah, I think we need as many messages about that kind of stuff as possible. So yeah,
Thanks.
I learned a ton in this conversation. Thank you so much
Cool.
again for joining me today, Bria.
Thank you.
Thank you everybody for watching today's episode of the Zero to Play podcast, and we hope you enjoyed it. And we will see you next time. Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode of the Zero to Play podcast. I hope you learned something about game development, the games industry as a whole, or the future of games. You can follow us on Twitter at Zero to Play, subscribe to us on YouTube or any other podcasting service. And I'll see you guys next week for the next episode.